Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to our latest session at LocalGov Drupal Week 2025. I'm Aaron, the community lead at LocalGov Drupal. And this session is, as you can see, Beyond Translation, Effective Multilingual LocalGov Drupal in Practice. It's being run by Tony Barker, who's our lead developer at LocalGov Drupal and at Anatech, which I'm sure he'll say a little bit more about in a mo. Before we get going, I just want to take the opportunity to thank our event sponsors. Anatech, previously mentioned, they hold the developer contract, which Tony's primarily working on. Agile Collective, who were the previous development team through the alpha and beta phases, and they still support our infrastructure and hosting and websites at the moment. And Big Blue Door, who are currently sponsoring Mark Conroy to work on the platform. And thank you also to our council subscribers and supplier subscribers and supporting partners who've contributed so much and enabled us to put on these sorts of events, as well as make the platforms as good as they are. In terms of Zoom, we've said this quite a lot, and I know there's quite a lot of people who've attended multiple events, but if this is your first time, you can change your viewing settings in the top right. And I think lots of people have found the React settings. They're in the sort of at the bottom. There's a heart icon and React. If you click on that, then you'll be able to send some different emojis that go floating up the screen. And also, once we get into Q&A, you can use that to raise your hand as well, if you'd like to. If you could also just make sure that you're muted, and to save on bandwidth and better for the environment, make sure your camera's off for now. That's all in the bottom left corner of your screen, or should be. Right, I reckon without further ado, Tony, it's over to you. Have fun.
Thank you. Thanks. So thanks for joining us, everybody. This is a bit of a mouthful. Beyond Translation, Effective Multilingual LocalGov Drupal in Practice. So we'll look at some technical aspects and some things that kind of go beyond translation into UX. 1 second. So I'm Tony Barker. I'm the front-end LGD specialist at Anatech. I'm the lead developer of the LocalGov Drupal project. I'm also involved in Drupal CMS and organising Drupal Camp England. About Anatech. So Anatech has a lot of expertise in local government predating LocalGov Drupal and has been involved since the beta phase. We are certified suppliers of LocalGov Drupal and also Drupal Platinum certified partners. And here are some of my colleagues. So we are a team of around 40 people, as far away as Thailand and Lebanon. Lots of colleagues in Europe and a big presence in the UK and Ireland as well. So for a lot of my colleagues in Europe, multilingual is bread and butter for them because the sites in their countries generally are multilingual. So I've learned a lot from working alongside them and picking up their practices. Here's a list of some of our LocalGov Drupal and Drupal council sites. On the left-hand side are people we've worked with on LocalGov Drupal projects, and there are more besides these. So a quick outline, I'm going to have a look at some terminology. I'm going to make a rough effort at stating the case for multilingual. This was a bit of a journey of discovery for me, so I'll tell you what I found along the way as well. A quick demo of the LocalGov Drupal multilingual module. I'll look at some overlay tools, thinking about some UX points, tips, and putting ourselves into the minds of people for whom English might not be their first language, or in other countries where their they're viewing the website in something other than their first language. Think about internationalisation of data sources, and I look forward to. So terminology, as you'll see kind of later on in the presentation, there are some reasons why I'm not taking any of these terms for granted. That even things that we might think are obvious can mean different things to different people. So having a look at language and country, if we think about using a flag for a language switcher, it doesn't really make sense unless you're switching country, because as you can see from this slide, in Brazil, they speak Brazilian Portuguese. There are 4 official languages in Switzerland, and Dutch, French, and German are all spoken in Belgium. Thinking about multilingual, to me, that means offering, in this context, a website in more than one language. Translation in this context is taking a page that's in a primary language and translating it into others. By internationalisation, I mean presenting a website in more than one country. Localisation, we do anyway in the council context, but we might take local customs and dialects into consideration. And finally, asymmetric translation. Here's a little simple example. What I mean by that is that we translate not directly into another language, but we actually change the content as well. So here there's a simple example where we've added something for people who might not speak English primarily, but it could be that we're adding images or changing images and other things too. So the case for multilingual. In the case of Irish Council websites and Welsh websites, the decision to translate is made quite simple by the legislation. It's mandatory to have translations, and in Wales, Welsh must be treated no less favourably than English. In the UK, translation is discretionary, and it's a bit of a political hot potato, whether people should be investing in translations and translation services. I won't go into too much depth there, but there may be cases where it does make sense when there is a cost saving that we could make and it improves the experience for a citizen. For example, by presenting something in a digital format, can we save translation costs and staff costs because people can easily carry out a task from their own home, for example. From an accessibility perspective, the WCAG guidelines don't prescribe that you should translate content, but what's important is that your page markup enables programmatic tools, assistive technologies, and overlay tools to be able to understand what language the content is in. So an example there is to set the tags in your HTML. The GA there is for Irish, and the list element is in English. So that's where we have a partial bit of content in another language to the page's primary language. So the LocalGov Multilingual module, just a quick demo, which I've prepared the last couple of days. This was originally contributed by Tipperary when Anatech brought LocalGov Drupal to Ireland. It was important for them to be able to translate web pages. And since then, the module has grown, so it now supports lots of different content types, and it's built on top of Drupal's powerful translation management system. So there are customizations as well that can be made in the configuration. So here's a demo. Some of the editing might be a little iffy because it was quite long to begin with, so I've chopped it down for time. So here I'm just installing the LocalGov Multilingual module. And what that does is it sets some configuration and sets up a few languages, English, Welsh, and Irish out of the box. And I'm just going to walk through translating some content. I've chosen this simple guide to translate. And since I'm not an Irish speaker, I did use AI to translate the content for me. And then just to make sure there weren't any howlers or bloopers, I translated it back into English using a different tool. Oh, excuse me. I translated it back into English using a different tool to make sure that there was nothing terrible in there. I'll come on to the control of AI tools a little bit later. So we're provided a translate button on each node page, and then we can create our translation in the language we want and then edit the content as usual in Drupal. This one is the guide overview page. So then when I come to my guide page and go to edit that, if I translate this now into Irish, as you can see, the guide parent page has been automatically detected. So then it's a case of going through and updating my content. So this way of working is a bit labor intensive compared with overlay tools. But what it does do is it gives us full control over the content. So if we wanted to do some asymmetric translations, we do have the power to do that. So saving that one. And then I'm not going to put you through the pain of translating every page. So that's our guide translated, but there is a problem. Down here on the bottom, it still says previous. So what we can do using Drupal's translation modules is, and here comes a horrible edit again, is enable the interface translation, which opens up these pages where we can translate individual strings. So here we can search for previous and paste our Irish translation for previous. Again, if that's incorrect, I apologize. And let's do the same here for next. And now when I go back to the front end and reload the page, our string has been updated to the Irish. So pretty much everything in Drupal is translatable. The menus, footer items, some things may be in templates rather than content. So when they're in templates, we can use that interface translation to control the translations. And Drupal auto detects the strings when we go to visit that page and sees the translate key. So doing the same here for the alert banners, and many other content types work exactly the same way as these. It's hit the translate button and enter your translated content. So if we go to the front page and reload now, we can see that's been translated. We do have a hide button there, that's still in English. So following the same method, we can update that by searching for hide and pasting our Irish language translation in there. So if we save that and go back to the front end, then now we should see all of our content translated. And again, we can extend this to translate everything in Drupal. So the twig that made that translation possible is simply adding a translate key to wherever we have a string. And throughout LocalGov Drupal, we're always keeping an eye out for these things and making sure that they're translatable. So that if you have a French website or any other country, you should be able to translate your own strings in that interface. Some examples, here's Tipperary and Galway County Council and Galway City Council. And just a couple of examples here, we do have the control to translate media, like images and documents. So Galway City here have an Irish version of the PDF, which just isn't possible with an overlay tool. And just coming back to the accessibility point there, all the markup should be correct too. There are a couple of limitations. It does take a human resource, and if you have partial or missing translations, it can be difficult for people to follow. So a quick look as well at client-side translation overlay tools. So what do I mean by those? Well, these tools I found to be quite commonly used on LocalGov Drupal sites. Google Translate, Recite Me, which is also an accessibility tool. ReachDeck, which has translations powered by Google Translate. And it's important to remember as well that people do have their own assistive technologies and they can use other tools to translate the content of a website that's served in English or a primary language. So a quick demo of what I found to kind of show some of the problems. So this is, I didn't have to dig too deep for problems, but then again, I wasn't browsing the site reading content like a normal user would. So in a lot of cases, it's quite straightforward just to go through and read regular pages. So I chose French because I have a chance of understanding the output. Could have chosen from loads and loads of languages. This is Solihull using Recite Me. And as you can see, all of the content of the page has been translated into French. But just to illustrate, search isn't going to work in another language because it's all indexed in English. So I can search for bins and I'll get the translated content for bins and the search results. But if I search for the French term, I get no results. So that's just a limitation of the overlay tools. An example here of Haringey, and they're using Google Translate. I have to scroll down to the footer to find the translation widget, which some people might not know is there. But as you can see, the media is still served in English. And a common problem, of course, is that many of the council properties are on different websites. So if we go somewhere else, then we lose our translation overlay. All the dates are translated quite nicely, but there is one little issue down here with the email address, which is that an A has been prepended to the beginning of the email address. So if somebody tries to email that address, obviously it will bounce back. Over to Brighton very quickly, and let's select French again. So rather than an overlay, this is Google Translate wrapping the website in French. And what keeps happening to me here is I keep getting this original text pop up, which is a bit of a pain as I'm trying to move through links and things. But as you can see, the French translation is pretty good. However, for some reason, Google Translate doesn't like the following link. So it just comes to a hard stop and tells me it can't translate the page. So maybe there's some JavaScript or something in there that it can't interpret. One last example, and this is a reach deck that Bedford and some other councils are using. Works in a similar way to the other tools, and for a comparison, I found that there really isn't too much difference between the tools in terms of the quality of their translations. They're all pretty good at translating. But one thing is I do question whether it's useful to have all of these options of kind of every language in the world, because it is quite hard to find the one that you want. The problem that I found on this site is that our content is larger for the French than the English. So that means that the button doesn't work effectively. And then I think this is probably some JavaScript replacing the content. So that doesn't get translated. But all these bugs and niggles, to be honest with you, are probably not going to stop somebody from being able to find the information they want, because they can hit the back button. And there was just an example there of an overlay that's probably coming from a third-party script that also wasn't translated. So limitations, we don't have control over what is translated. And in most cases, that's not a problem. But I found that it doesn't understand local government reorganization. It translates that to the kind of general term local government reform. Media isn't translatable. In one case, I found that the translation policy is a PDF, which is probably not ideal. Search, forms, and some other things that we showed there. And asymmetric translation isn't possible. The other one is privacy. So if we're using Google Translate, what is Google doing with our identifiable information? We should know and make sure that our citizens' privacy is protected. So that is the end of the sort of demo section. Thinking about findability and quality and moving on to UX. So on the whole, I think in everything we do on our council websites, these are the two goals: trying to find the information I'm looking for, and how easy is it to read or take action once I get to the right place. So thinking about navigation and search and language, and some of these other things like PDFs and UX. Once we've found our content, in general, is pretty easy to follow, but in some cases it can be difficult to use or find the translation widget. So some tips here for language switches. The first one, comprehension of the language switcher. We could get stuck in a language we don't understand and not know how to get back to the language we wanted or select the language we wanted. Don't use flags, as I said. Test keyboard access and screen reader access, especially if you're using an overlay tool. Can you actually get to the overlay tool from the language switcher? Discoverability. Please don't hide language switches down in the footer with no other way to get to them, especially on mobile devices. That's going to be tricky to find. Persistence and retaining context. So as we move through the website, do our tools remember what language we selected? And when we use the language switcher, do we get dumped off to the home page, or do we retain the context of where we were? So all things to look out for. Particularly on mobile, be wary of drop-down menu traps where our language switcher might be inside the drop-down, but then we can't move outside it. Because in some cases we're not changing pages, so we're not following links and having the mobile menu automatically close. And then spacing around touch targets, especially if the language switcher is in a 2-character format like EN or GA or CY. In those cases, sometimes the language switcher options can be really close together, and that means we might trigger things we don't want to trigger, especially for people with motor issues that struggle to tap on a small area. So a couple of things to bear in mind there. Coming back to asymmetric translations, so this was a question of discovery for me when I was thinking about this session. Is there a case for asymmetric translations for councils? And I concluded that there wasn't, so I'll explain why I came to that conclusion. Thinking about personas, so who might be looking at a website in a language other than the primary language. We might put our persona hat on and put ourselves in the shoes of a migrant, of a tourist, or of a student. Something I think we could easily assume is that people might use a language switcher because they don't speak any English at all. And I think that's a mistake, because there are a lot of people who speak very good English, but don't speak necessarily business English or technical English. So understanding terms that native English speakers might use might be difficult for people, even if they're quite good at English. So this applies to, I think, something like council tax, where some councils are covering these sorts of questions really well, and others are leading with actions that you might take, like paying your council tax. But if you don't understand what council tax is, that's probably the first hurdle, and that's where you might jump to a language switcher and then find, in any case, that the content doesn't cover the information you were trying to find. So answering questions like, what is council tax? What services are paid for by council tax? I found that in some cases that's covered in one line, but doesn't really explain to somebody who doesn't know anything at all about the council tax system, which isn't in place in other countries. So it could be a strange concept. And then taking the Japanese domestic waste system as an example, our bin collections and waste sections of our websites might talk about bin colors and might talk about collection times and that sort of thing, with the assumption that people broadly know how the waste system works in the UK. If you're from another country, for example, Poland has a national system, so it might not be obvious that a different authority has a different bin collection system. And in Japan, they sort their waste by burnable garbage and non-burnable garbage. So in summary, I don't think asymmetric translations are correct, because I think that these are questions that should be answered in English for people who may speak very good English, and for people with a low reading age, children, or in general, just trying to make our content more accessible. So the last section is just a quick look at data sources and APIs. I think with consideration for internationalization, as the LocalGov Drupal product kind of grows and has interest from other countries that are looking at what we're doing in the UK and Ireland, a couple of cases where it may not be about language, but about the data structures. So we have some country-specific data models, like elections is a great example, where we have wards and we have first past the post systems. In other countries, there may be proportional representation and other election systems. So our data model won't necessarily translate to another country. And again, with the bins collection module, it depends on the UK IDs and postcodes. So to support the adoption of LocalGov Drupal and make the tools accessible to people in other countries, if we can abstract the way that we write modules so that they're more pluggable with other data models, and come to kind of international consensus and consensus between councils on data structures, that just means that they can be used by more people. And a couple of examples from Ireland, where the planning and meetings modules exist at the moment just for Irish councils, but there's something I think that the UK councils are interested in too. And the blight warning module that Tim from TIP created, which consumes data from the Met and shows an alert when there's a blight warning. So there are all sorts of use cases where perhaps there are opportunities for us to make systems that can plug into all sorts of data sources. Looking forward, I think in the future there will be sophisticated automated translations that will reduce the cost of translating content. I hope that there's still some human review to take advantage, I think, of what's coming, follow what web best practices and standards, use the PDF importer, because as we've seen, if the content is on HTML pages, they can be translated. If they're just locked away in PDFs, it's more difficult. Let's continue the conversation on LocalGov Drupal Slack in our LocalGov Drupal groups, on the Drupal.org issue queues, and Drupal and LocalGov Drupal in-person events. There's an event in January, Drupal for EU, I believe it's called, and Drupal Camp England, and of course all the LocalGov Drupal events. And anybody is welcome to drop me an email as well, tony@anatech.com. So thank you everyone for listening. Are there any questions?
Nice one, Tony. Very good. That was great. That was a really good refresher for me. I haven't done any multilingual in Drupal for ages, so it's really interesting to see how easy it is these days. We've got a few questions. We've got a few questions.
Yeah.
I had one comment on the sort of your supposition about automatic translation using AI models and that kind of thing. It was kind of picking up on what Alison said, which is like, I wonder how that plays to like content guidelines and tone and voice and things. And I was thinking about this conversation that's been going on in the content meetups quite a lot over the last sort of few months.
Yeah, so as part of the AI initiative, I can't remember the name of the module, but there is a module where we can include some tone of voice for the AI tools to use. However, that is only going to be at the moment for Drupal translator content. So another point of discovery for me is there some metadata or something that we can add to the pages to give overlay tools some more information about what's on the page? For example, could we tell the tool some way in our markup to leave local government reorganization as a literal term and not to translate it? So that's something else for me to explore, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, cool, interesting. Yeah, lots of interesting challenges with translation. I'm going to go back to the top. Akeem was asking what I think it was, which AI tool did you use to translate it back to English? You said you translated it into Irish and then did a check with another tool. What did you use?
Yeah, so I first of all used Claude and asked it to translate the text of the demo content into Irish. And then when I'd done that, I put it into ChatGPT to translate it back into English. And yeah, I
how
actually
close? Yeah, how well did that? How close were the two, would you say?
I found it to be very close, and in fact the quality of the regurgitated language was slightly better. It was a bit more polite and polished.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, it as I say, it does struggle with trying to understand proper nouns and literal things.
Again, you could improve that with the prompt, couldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So Gareth, Pembrokeshire asks, can you configure both language instances for use on two domains? So for example, default English to www.pembrokeshire.gov.uk and Welsh to www. sir-benfro.gov.uk. Apologies, Gareth, I may have absolutely butchered that.
It's all in Drupal, so I reckon you can. Let me come back on that one.
Yeah, someone else on the chat may know that as well.
Yeah, if you're a Drupal
we have actually done that for a client, but I can't remember who off the top of my head. But yeah, it's been done. It's possible.
Yeah, it rings a bell for me as well. Yeah, okay, we'll come back on that, Gareth. But yeah, it seems very highly likely you can do that. G10 at Leicester asks, would the LocalGov Multilingual module serve as a better tool for translation compared to using Google Translate? What are the differences between the two?
Yeah, so I suppose the two key differences are control. If you're using Drupal translations, you're in full control over the content that's on the site. Whereas with Google Translate, you're not in control, and in some cases, usually that's fine, but in some cases, we think about the coronavirus pandemic. If the information was wrong, then that could have consequences. So when people are using these tools, there are disclaimers for those sorts of things. So control is one difference, and the other key difference is cost. So it costs almost next to nothing to plug an overlay tool in. To translate a web page, can cost hundreds of pounds if it's a lot of content just for one page. There are some services, or like there's a company called Lingotech that's kind of a middle ground, but that's still probably quite expensive for councils, especially smaller councils, that are not obligated to do it. So cost is the other big difference at the moment. But I think as we move forward with AI tools, AI will be able to do most of the translation, and then human reviewers can correct mistakes and things that the public pick up. So I think that in future we'll be able to have the best of both worlds.
I guess the key is that if you're using LocalGov Drupal Multilingual, you've got to do the translation yourself. It's a manual process, whereas with Google Translate, you're plugging it in and it'll do that automatically with the problems that you outlined.
Yeah.
Cool. Richard White asks, yes, there is a question there. Previously using ReciteMe, we've added verified translated index/keyword search terms on core content web pages to improve searching in other languages. That makes sense. Could this also translate added index content/keywords in that language in LocalGov Drupal? Richard, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I don't know if you can come off mute and just clarify. I can see you at the bottom right of my screen. Are you there, Richard? Unless you did you get that, Tony?
I'm not sure I follow, but they're two different systems. So I'm sure that ReciteMe has some controls, probably more than Google Translate, where you do have control over translations. I think I remember it might have been ReciteMe or it might have been another tool having a problem with Cork. So Cork is a place in Ireland, and Cork is also a Cork bottle. So I do remember a case where that was being translated, and we did have some control over what to do with that word.
I think maybe, if I understand the question correctly, it might be that if you're searching in using search in LocalGov Drupal and you're using the translation, you could have a specific field on a content type where you're adding keywords in another language that would be indexed by search and therefore might give you search results that are useful. I think it's that mechanism.
That bit in the middle, I haven't tried it, but it's good if you can do that. Very useful.
Other people may have understood other things. Michael says overlay tools are not great for SEO, thinking on service microsites like adoption, for example. That's true. That's true. If you're searching in other languages, you simply won't find the content. Karen makes the point that it's not great in terms of accessibility either. So G10 had a follow-up question. In your professional opinion, would using Google Translate on a council website be risky? We'll hold you to this, Tony.
This is a legal department thing and not something really for me to answer. I think it is risky if we think about ourselves as only being as strong as our weakest link. We can say in most cases it's useful for things to be translated, but in spite of our legal disclaimers, we want to be thinking about the experiences of real people. So even if somebody can't sue us by some poor translation, are we causing somebody to to have a bad day? So that's why I'd like eventually to see us having great translations that we have control over.
Totally agree. We'll take one more question because we're at time, and Michael has a question. Can it integrate with auto translation tools? So for automated translation, for example, DeepL API, or similar, presumably some sort of. I think you mentioned Lingotech, which you mentioned as a sort of halfway house. I don't think that's automated in the same way, but.
So Lingotech, there is some automation between their system and Drupal, or that automatically pulls in the translations. The Drupal and AI initiative tools will be able to automate translations from all sorts of tools if the provider is available. I'm not sure specifically about that that particular tool. But have a look on Drupal.org. Maybe there's some support.
So you're saying, Tony, that you could have an AI agent, translation agent that could be triggered to translate your content.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anybody's working on that yet, but it
Yeah.
seems like a natural progression.
With the caveats around AI, etc.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Fab, Tony. Thank you. That was great. That was really, really, really nice to see that. Thank you so much for covering some of the principles as well, the sort of conceptual ideas around translation. It's not just as straightforward as going one language to another.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for coming and your comments and questions. I hope you found it useful. We'll get this video live, and I think, Tony, what we should do is probably just add this to our doc site as well as part of the multilingual bit, make sure, because I think it'll be a good reference for people. Thank you to our sponsors, Anatech, Agile Collective, and Big Blue Door. Finn did this last time, so thank you. Appreciate your support. And please give us feedback by email after this. There are loads more sessions. We've got the Open Digital Cooperative AGM at 4 o'clock. We'll be sharing a little bit about plans for the next 18 months. And some other sort of more standard things, as well as announcing the new directors through the elections. It's an open AGM, so feel free to come along, anyone, if you want to see what's going on and see that sort of side of LocalGov Drupal. And otherwise, see you very soon. Thank you.